Hamilton rides through the darkness, the hooves of his horse pounding against the frozen ground. The winter wind cuts through his coat, but he barely feels it. His satchel is heavy with the dispatches, messages Washington needs before dawn, messages that could determine whether the Continental Army survives another week. He reaches the encampment at Valley Forge just as the first hints of gray touch the sky. The camp is silent, except for the low murmur of soldiers trying to stay warm, the breath rising in pale clouds. Tents sag under the weight of the snow. Fires burn low. Hungers bang in the air like a presence. Hamilton dismounts, boots crunching in the frost, and makes his way through the largest tent, Washington's. Inside, the general stands over a table scattered with maps, letters, and a half burned candle. His face is lined with exhaustion, but his posture is unbroken. He looks up as Hamilton enters. Colonel Hamilton, Washington says, voice steady. Tell me what Congress has decided. Hamilton hesitates. He knows the truth will land like a blow. They have debated, sir, he says carefully, but no supplies are coming. Not yet. Washington closes his eyes for a moment, not in despair, but in calculation. He has learned to swallow disappointment the way other men swallow water. Hamilton watches him and something shifts inside him. This, this moment, is where Hamilton's political philosophy begins to harden. He sees the cost of a weak central government. He sees the danger of indecision. He sees how fragile the revolution truly is. Washington opens his eyes again. Then we will endure, he says quietly. We always do. Hamilton nods, but the words echo to him differently. Endurance is not enough. Not for a nation. Not for a future. He steps outside the tent, the cold biting at his skin, and looks out over the camp. The shivering soldier. The empty supply wagons. The thin lines between survival and collapse. He thinks of the hurricane on St. Croix. He thinks of the chaos that shaped him. He thinks of the orders he craves. And he makes a silent vow. If this nation survives the war, he will make sure it never faces this kind of weakness again. This is the birth of Hamilton's conviction, not in theory, not in philosophy, but in lived experience. The revolution is not just a fight for independence. It is a fight for structure, for stability, for a government strong enough to protect its people. Hamilton doesn't know it yet, but the idea forming in the cold at Valley Forge will one day become the backbone of the American financial system. For now, though, he is simply a young officer with frozen fingers, a restless mind, and a future he can feel pressing against him like a rising tide. The Constitutional Convention, the heat, the tension, the stakes, the summer air in Philadelphia is thick enough to chew. Hamilton wipes sweat from his brow as he steps into Pennsylvania State House. The windows are shut tight to keep out eavesdroppers, turning the room into a total furnace. Delegates fan themselves with papers. Coats are discarded. Tempers are simmering. This is the Constitutional Convention, the place where the future of the United States will be hammered into shape. Hamilton takes his seats, eyes scanning the room. Madison is already scribbling notes. Franklin sits quietly, watching everything with the patience of a man who has seen too much to be surprised by anything, and at the front, Washington presides with the calm authority that holds the entire gathering together. The debate begins. Voices rise, arguments clash. The delegates are not just discussing government, they are wrestling with human nature itself. Hamilton listens, absorbing every word. He hears fear in some voices, fear of tyranny, fear of a centralized power. He hears idealism in others, faith in the virtue of the people, faith in the states. Then he stands. The room is quiet. Hamilton speaks with the intensity of a man who has lived the consequences of political weakness. He argues for a strong national government, for executive power, for a system capable of surviving crisis. His words are sharp, precise, and unyielding. Some delegates nod, others recoil. Hamilton knows he is pushing too far for many of them. He knows his vision is more centralized than the room will accept, but he also knows something else. If he doesn't articulate the strongest version of his ideas, the final compromise will be too weak. He is not trying to win, he is trying to anchor the debate. When he finishes, the room is silent. Washington meets his eyes, not with agreement, but with respect. Hamilton sits down, heart pounding, shirt clinging to his back. He has not shaped the Constitution directly, but he has shaped the conversation. And when the final document emerges, it's balanced, structured, imperfect, but durable. Hamilton sees his fingerprints through the entire architecture, not in the detail, but in the strength. Fast forward to the Treasury. Hamilton builds the American financial system not as a political policy lecture, but as a lived experience. The door of the Treasury slams open with a gust of cold morning air. Hamilton strides in. Coat unbuttoned, hair slightly disheveled, eyes blazing with the kind of focus that makes everyone in the room straighten instinctively. Clerks scramble to their desk. Papers rustle. Ink blot pots clink. The entire department seems to inhale at once. It is 1790, and the United States is drowning in debt. Hamilton drops the stack of ledgers onto his desk. The wood groans under the weight and begins flipping through pages with the speed of a man who has already memorized every single number. The room smells of ink, sweat, and ambition. Gentlemen, he says without looking up, we are going to build a nation today. A clerk clears his throat. Sir, Congress is divided. Hamilton smiles a sharp, knowing smile. Congress is always divided. That's why we give them something worth uniting around. He begins dictating, pacing the room like a general preparing for battle. First, the federal government assumes the state's debts. All of them. Clerk hesitates. Sir, some states will object. Of course they will, Hamilton says. That's why we give them something they want more. He stops pacing. His voice softens, but the intensity remains. Stability, credit, a future. He moves to the window, looking out at the muddy streets of Philadelphia. The capital still temporary, the nation still fragile. Hamilton sees beyond the mud, beyond the uncertainty, and beyond the arguments. He sees a country that would stand shoulder to shoulder with the great powers of the world, if it can survive its infancy. He turns back to his clerks. We create a national bank. We establish federal taxes. We build a mint. We give the nation the tools to grow. A clerk raises a timid hand. Sir, Jefferson says the national bank is unconstitutional. Hamilton's jaw tightens. not in anger, but in anticipation. Jefferson reads the Constitution as if it was a cage. I read it as if it were a blueprint. He sits finally and begins writing, the quill scratching within the urgency of a man racing time itself. The report on public credit, the report on National Bank, the report on manufacturers, documents that will outlive him, documents that will shape the American economy for centuries. Hours begin to pass. The sun moves across the sky. Clerks come and go. Hamilton barely notices. He is building something no one has ever built before, a financial system for a country that barely exists. At one point, Washington enters quietly. Hamilton, you've been at it since dawn. Hamilton looks out, eyes bright. Sir, the nation cannot wait. Hamilton guides him. Or, excuse me. Washington studies him, the restless energy, the brilliance, the fragility. Beneath the confidence, you're pushing too hard, Washington says gently. Hamilton nods because if we don't act now, sir, we may not get another chance. Washington places a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture of affection. Then let us act, he says, and together they do. Jefferson Adams and the political politics of personality. This is, based on, Room's letters and tensions. The dinner table is set with polished silver and fine wine, but the air is thick with something far less refined. Jefferson sits at one end, posture elegant, expression calm but cool. Madison sits beside him, quiet, observant, calculating. At the other end of the table, Hamilton leans forward, elbows on the wood, eyes sharp, voice already rising. This is the famous dinner at Jefferson's house, the the one that will lead to the compromise of 1790. But tonight it feels less like diplomacy and more like a storm contained by candle. Jefferson pours wine with deliberate grace. Alexander, your financial plan consolidates far too much power in the federal government. Hamilton doesn't blink. Thomas, your vision leaves the nation defenseless against its own weakness. Jefferson's smile is thin. I trust the people. Hamilton replies immediate. I trust systems. Masson clears his throat. Gentlemen, perhaps, but the argument is already in motion. Hamilton's voice is fire, passionate, relentless, fueled by lived experience. Jefferson is ice, controlled, philosophical, rooted in ideas. Madison tries to mediate, but the clash is bigger than any one conversation. It is clash of worldviews. Hamilton sees a nation that must build. Jefferson sees a nation that must be protected. Adams sees a nation that must be preserved. And none of them see each other clearly. Later in private, Hamilton writes furiously. Essays, letters, rebuttals. His pen becomes a weapon. Jefferson, meanwhile, cultivates alliances quietly, strategically. Adams fumes, feeling overshadowed by both. The feuds are not political. They are personal. They are emotional. They are human. And the shape of the first political parties, not through ideology alone, but through personality, begin to form. The Federalists, the Democratic Republicans, the beginning of the American polarization. Not because the founders wanted division, but because they were human beings trying to solve impossible problems with imperfect tools. And Hamilton, brilliant and volatile, is the center of it all. We're stepping now into the final act of Hamilton's life, the quiet dread, the ritual, the river, the duel. This is where the story tightens, slows, and becomes almost unbearably human. Settle in. We're going to Weehawken. The sky is still dark when Hamilton wakes. For a moment he lies still, listening to the soft breath of his children down the hall. The faint creak of the house settle, the whisper of the wind against the shutters. The world feels suspended, as if dawn itself is reluctant to arrive. He dresses quietly, a white shirt, a dark cloak, the same care he would take for a formal dinner, though this morning is anything but. Eliza stirs as he moves through the room. She doesn't awake. Or perhaps she does, but chooses not to speak. Some silences are too heavy to break. Hamilton pauses in the doorway, watching her for a long moment. The candle on the table flickers, casting a soft glow across her face. He memorizes it. The curve of her cheek, the gentleness of her expression, the life they build together despite everything. Then he turns. Outside, the July air is thick and warm. A carriage waits. His friend, Nathaniel Pendleton, stands beside him, hat in hand. Are you ready? Hamilton Pendleton asks. Hamilton nods, though the truth is more complicated. He is ready for the ritual, ready for the melody, ready for the performance of the honor that dueling demands. But ready to die? No, not really. The carriage rattles through the quiet streets of Manhattan, wheels clattering over cobblestones. Hamilton watches the city pass by, the harbor, the warehouses, the rising outlines of a nation he helped shape. He wonders what it will become without him. He wonders if he will be remembered him, if we will remember him kindly. And then they reach the river. The boatman waits in silence. Hamilton steps onto the small skiff, the wood rocking beneath him, the oars dipping into the water, breaking the surface with soft, rhythmic splashes. The Hudson stretches out before him, dark and still, and reflecting the faintest hint of dawn. Halfway across, Hamilton closes his eyes. He sees the hurricane. He sees Washington's tent. He sees the Constitutional Convention. He sees the Treasury Office. He sees his wife Eliza. He sees his children. He sees the country fragile, unfinished, and full of promise and peril. The boat bumps gently across the rocky shore of Weehawken, and Hamilton steps out. The dueling ground is quiet, a narrow ledge overlooking the river. The cliffs rise themselves like silent witnesses. Birds stir in the trees. The air smells of earth and river mist. Aaron Burr arrives moments later. He is composed, elegant, unreadable. His coat is immaculate. His expression is calm. But his eyes carry something deeper: hurt, pride, resentment, a lifetime of slights unreal and imagined. The second confer, the the seconds confer, pistols are prepared, the rules are recited. Hamilton removes his glasses. He checks the pistol and turns to face Burr. For a moment, just one moment, the world holds stills. Then the command is given. Hamilton raises his pistol and fires into the air. A deliberate miss. A final gesture of restraint. A last attempt to end a conflict without blood. But Burr fires directly at Hamilton. The sound cracks through the morning like a breaking world. Hamilton staggers, eyes wide, breath caught in his throat. He collapses onto the ground. the sky spinning above him. Pendleton rushes to his side. Burr steps forward, then stops, frozen, horrified, realizing too late what he had just done. Hamilton's breath is shallow, his pulse weak, his voice barely a whisper. Take care of my family, he murmurs. They carry him back across the river. Eliza is summoned, the children gathered, and Washington is told. Hamilton drips in and out of consciousness, the pain sharp but distant, as if his body is already letting go. He hears voices, familiar, beloved, fading, and then quietly, Alexander Hamilton slips away. The nation he helps build will never be the same. The river is calm now. The cliffs of Weehawken stand unchanged, but the world Hamilton left behind has transformed again and again. And yet the tensions he wrestled with, the balance between liberty and order, between federal power and local autonomy, between idealism and realism, still shapes our politics today. Hamilton believed in strong institutionalism because he had lived through chaos. Jefferson believed in individual freedom because he feared tyranny. Both were trying to protect the nation. Both were responding to their own experiences. Both were necessary. And that's the heart of the American experiment. Not one vision, not one ideology, but the tensions between them. Hamilton's life reminds us that democracy is not built on agreement. It is built on the struggle to balance competing truths. It is built on debate, compromise, and the willingness to see beyond our own fears. He has flaws. He was brilliant. He was human. And in that humanity, we find the story of a nation that's still learning how to hold itself together. For those willing to listen, the journey continues. Long after Hamilton's body is carried away across the Hudson, long after the newspaper print their shock and outrage, long after Burr's political career collapses under the weight of a single bullet, the river keeps moving. And maybe that's the quiet truth of the heart of the Hamilton story. The nations move, ideas move, people move, even when we don't know where the current is taking us. Hamilton lived his life like a man facing the river. He was always pushing, always building, always trying to outrun the chaos that shaped him. He believed in structure because he had lived through the instability. He believed in national unity because he had seen what division could do. He believed in ambition because ambition was the only thing that ever saved him. But he also believed something else, something easy to miss beneath the noise of his feuds and the sharpness of his pen. He believed this country could do better than the sum of its fears, and that belief still matters. Because the tension Hamilton wrestled with, liberty and order, idealism and realism, local power and national strength, didn't end with him. They didn't end with the founders. They didn't end in the 19th century or the 20th century. They're still here today. They're still shaping us. They're still asking us to choose not between sides but between extremes. Hamilton's life reminds us that democracy isn't built on agreement. It's built on the struggle to balance competing truths. It's built on the courage to argue without dehumanizing, to disagree without destroying, to see complexity where others demand simplicity. And maybe that's why his story still resonates. Not because he was perfect, not because he was right, not because he was human, or maybe it was because he was human. He was brilliant, flawed, driven, afraid, hopeful, and because the nation he helped build is still wrestling with the same questions he tried to answer. So we close this chapter of Balanced Voices. We return to the river, steady, patient, moving forward. And for those who are willing to listen, we continue to grow, and the journey continues. This has been Balanced Voices. Thank you for joining us today as we discovered the life of Alexander Hamilton. He is far more than just a musical. He was a brilliant man, complex, a little bit of a temper. But some of the best politicians out there that have been had a little bit of a temper. Just means that they're passionate. I chose to examine Alexander Hamilton today, not because there's a musical that, a famous Broadway musical that people fight for tickets, but because Alexander Hamilton still resonates today. We still have the same issues: absolute power, freedom of the people. You still, the names have changed from Federalist and Democratic Republican to Republican versus Democrat. But if your politicians are doing their job the way they're supposed to be doing their job, there should be healthy debate. There should be compromise. And the country will continue to build. Both political parties, they have their, any political party has their own philosophies and their own standings. Here at Balanced Voices, we try to explore things from a center of the road point of view. In this podcast, I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat. I'm not even really an independent. We're not focusing on whose belief is what, whether, whether you're left or right or center of the road. That's not what I'm trying to establish. We're looking at the history because it's very important to know the history of the United States. Because if you do not focus on the history and remember your history, history is doomed to repeat itself. Don't don't be the person that forgets. Now, as far as Aaron Burr, his political career was completely ruined after he shot Alexander Hamilton on July 11th. Although he was the sitting United States vice president at the time, the duel effectively destroyed his political future. He was charged with murder but never tried. His reputation was ruined. Hamilton was lionized as a martyr and Burr became a villain. He finished his term as vice president in disgrace in March of 1805, but he was politically isolated. Jefferson froze him out. Congress avoided him. He became a ghost in his own government. After leaving office, Burr traveled west and became involved in a mysterious scheme that may have involved creating an independent nation in the Southwest, leading a military expedition into Spanish territory, or simply acquiring the land. The details remain debated, but the U.S. government charged him with treason. He was tried in 1807 and acquitted, but the scandal destroyed whatever remained of his reputation. He lived in exile in Europe for the rest for much of the rest of his life. He returned to the United States under a fake name in 1812, living quietly under the name Edwards. He resumed work as a lawyer but never regained political influence. His beloved daughter, Theodosia, disappeared at sea in 1813. His finances collapsed, and he suffered a debilitating stroke. He died in 1836 at age 80, largely forgotten, overshadowed by the duel that defined him. This isn't the only instance of violence in Congress among political rivals. I think one instance that made me laugh the most was during a debate in Congress. One senator or congressman hit another senator with his cane. Um, when your ideals, you have such strong ideals, sometimes you don't use the brain cells to think of what's right, and you just act out irrationally. Unfortunately for Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, it cost both of them their lives. Alexander Hamilton died. Aaron Burr, he didn't die right away, but his career and his lifestyle was completely ruined, and it was all by a simple decision that they both regretted, I'm sure. Anyway, this has been Balanced Voices. See you next time.